Welcome to the 1001 Business Problems Solved with Microsoft Teams podcast. I'm Annie Rind, your faithful business hostess with the mostest, and I bring you a new episode every Monday morning around 4 o'clock Central Time, assuming, of course, the week behaves itself and I get everything finished on time. I do not miss very often. I think I have only been late 2 or 3 times in 120 episodes, which is pretty good if I do say so myself. But as we all know, never say never. Technology can break, life can intervene, and sometimes Monday morning arrives with a little more enthusiasm than I was ready for. Over the last few months, we have been focused on some fairly heavy topics. We have talked about strategy. We have talked a lot about Copilot. We have talked about how leaders can use AI not just as a handy little helper, but as a real thinking partner. I hope those episodes have been useful to you, and I hope they have helped you see what is becoming possible when Microsoft 365 is used with some intention behind it. This week, though, I want to change the rhythm a bit. Not because those heavier topics are unimportant, but because I do not want this podcast to become the same old every Monday morning. Sometimes the best thing we can do is step back, look around the Microsoft 365 neighborhood, and ask a very practical question. What about all those other Microsoft apps? That question came up this past week because a client asked it very directly. He wanted an overview of the other Microsoft apps sitting out there in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem because he strongly suspects there is some good stuff hiding in them. And frankly, he is right. Now, I will admit that our first instinct was to be a little allergic to that request. Around here, we are pretty committed to the idea that you should focus on friction first. In other words, do not start by asking, what can this app do? Start by asking, where is work getting stuck? Start with the business problem, the recurring annoyance, the dropped handoff, the lost document, the manual spreadsheet, the meeting that produces no follow-through, or the process everybody tolerates because nobody has slowed down long enough to improve it. Once you know where the friction lives, then you can ask what tool might help remove it. That is still our philosophy, and I do not want to soften it too much. If you start with the tools, you can get overwhelmed very quickly. Microsoft has a bajillion apps, or at least it feels that way when you start poking around. They are powerful, they overlap in places, and they can solve so many different problems that a normal business owner or manager can spin their wheels for weeks just trying to decide where to begin. So yes, friction first. Always friction first. But after this client asked again, we reconsidered our first reaction. At first, I think we were going to do the overview mostly out of loyalty. He had asked for it twice, he is doing good work, and we wanted to give him the information he needed. But as we started reviewing those other apps more seriously, something interesting happened. We realized that looking at the apps can expose friction we had not yet thought to look for. That does not mean the app comes first. It means the app can sometimes reveal a category of problem you have been tolerating for so long that you stopped seeing it as a problem. And that is worth paying attention to. Here is the distinction that matters. If your organization is still drowning in basic information chaos, you probably do not need to chase every specialty app just yet. You likely need to get Teams, SharePoint, Planner, and Copilot deployed in a more structured way around your actual work. Most organizations still have enormous gains available just by getting the core system organized and aimed at real business processes. Arnie has told the story many times about a former manager who kept encouraging him to learn more about a third-party workflow software. There was nothing wrong with that software, of course. It was and is a legitimate tool for solving certain kinds of workflow problems. But at the time, Arnie kept pushing back because there was so much untapped value sitting right there inside the out-of-the-box Microsoft tools they already owned. SharePoint and Teams had not been fully used yet. Copilot was not around back then, but the principle was the same. Before you go add another specialized tool, make sure you are getting the value out of the foundation you already have. This current client, however, is in a different situation. He is already focused on friction first. He is not asking for shiny objects because he is bored. He and his organization have already done a lot of the foundational work. They have structured Teams and SharePoint around real work, real departments, and real processes. They are already reducing friction in practical ways. So when he asks, what about all those other apps? That question lands differently. At that point, it is not a distraction from the core philosophy. It becomes a next layer of exploration. Once your house is standing, it makes sense to ask which rooms need furniture, appliances, and maybe a few specialty tools that make life easier. Let me give you one quick example. Microsoft Shifts is a very specific app. It is not trying to be everything to everybody. It exists because a lot of organizations have scheduling friction, shift coverage friction, time tracking friction, or frontline workforce coordination problems. Microsoft would not build and maintain an app like that unless enough organizations had a similar kind of pain. That is the clue. When you look at a specialty app, you are not just looking at software. You are looking at evidence that a certain category of friction is common enough that Microsoft decided to address it. And once you understand why the app exists, you might realize your own organization has that same kind of friction, even if nobody has named it yet. That is why I want to kick off a short series on all those other Microsoft apps. I do not know yet whether this will be 2 episodes, 3 episodes, or maybe even 4. We will see how deeply we need to go. But the goal is not to turn this podcast into a catalog of Microsoft features. Nobody needs me reading app descriptions like the side of a cereal box. The goal is to help you understand the Microsoft 365 ecosystem through the lens of business friction. Why does this app exist? What kind of problem is it trying to solve? When should you ignore it? When should you experiment with it? And when might it be exactly the thing that unlocks a process you assumed just had to stay clunky forever? We still stand by our core claim. Most business friction can be reduced by properly deploying Teams, SharePoint, Planner, and Copilot around the way your organization actually works. And when I say properly deployed, I do not mean somebody created a team, added a few channels, and called it a day. I mean the system is intentionally shaped around your unique processes, your people, your decisions, your documents, your meetings, and your recurring work. That foundation matters. Without it, the other apps can become one more layer of clutter. With it, they can become targeted tools that sit naturally inside the right part of your work. So unless I change my mind before the end of the series, which I reserve the right to do because, well, I am Annie, the next episode will be a quick overview of the core system. I know some of that may seem like old news if you have listened for a while, but I want to lay out the whole Microsoft ecosystem in a way that helps you see how the pieces fit together. We will start with the core system, Teams, SharePoint, Planner, Copilot, and possibly Power Automate and Power BI, because those too often become important once your work starts getting more structured. After that, we can move into the operational tools. That may include Microsoft Forms, Approvals, Bookings, OneNote, and definitely Microsoft Lists, because Lists deserves a seat near the front of the room. Then we can look at some of the more specific friction-reducing apps like Shifts, Walkie-Talkie, Stream, Loop, and others that make sense once we see where this series wants to go. And that, friends, is where this next little series is going. We are going to explore the Microsoft 365 ecosystem without losing our minds in the app drawer. We are going to stay focused on friction, but we are also going to let the existence of these specialty apps teach us something about problems we may not have noticed yet. My hope is that by the end of the next few episodes, you will not just know a little more about Microsoft apps. You will be able to look at your own organization with fresh eyes and ask, what friction have we been living with simply because we did not know there was a better way? That is a useful question. And around here, useful questions are where good solutions usually begin. So come back next Monday around 4 a.m. Central Time, and we will start with the core apps. We will look at the foundation first, because that is still where the house has to begin. Until then, this is Annie signing off. Have a great week, and may all your bajillion apps find their proper home.